I'd like to extend my greetings to all of our participants, including representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, as well as members and friends of SIMS here in Ottawa. Bonjour à tous, Kalimera. With these words of welcome, I'd like to ask our former Canadian ambassador to Greece and member of the board of directors of SIMS, Robert Peck, to introduce the ambassador of the Hellenic Republic, Her Excellency Konstantina Athanasiadou, to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Louise. And before introducing Her Excellency, a short commercial, if I might, for an initiative that we're very excited about at SIMS. We're delighted to partner with the Canadian Institute in Greece to support the first SIMS CIG travel bursary valued at $1,000. The bursary aims to support undergraduate students who have reason to travel to Greece. It could be to take part in an archaeological project, a summer program, a study abroad program, or other activity of an academic and research nature. And in terms of criteria, very briefly, an undergraduate student at a Canadian university must be a Canadian citizen or a landed immigrant, and travel must be geared towards research in ancient or modern Hellenic history. More details can be found on the SIMS website, www.mediterraneanstudies.ca. And I would highlight that the deadline is fast approaching. It's March 1st. So those who are listening who might have interested students who might be eligible, we would simply ask that you help us spread the word. It's my great pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Konstantina Athanasiadou, who is the Ambassador of the Hellenic Republic to Canada, an accomplished scholar in philosophy, classical studies, linguistics, and history. She's a seasoned veteran of the Greek Foreign Ministry. In addition to her mother tongue, she's fluent in English, French, Spanish, and Russian. Ambassador Athanasiadou has served in Moscow, London, Alexandria, Brussels at the European Union, Geneva at the World Trade Organization, and in Pristina, Kosovo. And she has held a number of very senior roles at the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I should add, she happens to be as well the first woman ambassador named by Greece to Canada. Despite the constraints of the pandemic, she has been quick off the mark as Greece's representative to Canada and is known for her passion, her intellectual curiosity, and keen interest in art and continuous learning. And I might add, for her wonderful sense of humor. On behalf of SIMS, we are thankful to Her Excellency for her interest in SIMS, and now Ambassador Athanasiadou.
Good morning to all. I would like once more to congratulate the Canadian Institute for Mediterranean Studies for its important contribution for over 25 years in promoting culture, archaeology, and history of ancient Greece in Canada, and for subscribing to the relevant work presented by prestigious Canadian scholars and academics. In the same vein, I would like to express my full appreciation for the exquisite work and vision of the College of the Humanities, Carleton University, through the years. The excavations in Eleon, a cooperation between the Canadian Institute in Greece and the Ephorate of Antiquities of Boeotia, have been particularly acclaimed by the archaeological world, both because of the new discovery of utmost significance, the symmetry, but also because of valuable information provided in reading the puzzle of our common early history. I am thus very happy to attend today's lecture by the renowned Professor Brendan Burke on the Kingdom of Kadmos, and I will certainly take the opportunity to visit the excavation site next summer. This year is very important for our bilateral cooperation, as Greece and Canada, Canada and Greece, are commemorating 80 years of diplomatic relations. As we recover from a long pandemic, I hope that this particular relation between our two countries will conduce to a renewed archaeological cooperation. Canadian archaeologists and their students are always welcome in Greece. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for these kind words. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you take part and show your interest in the program of the Canadian Institute for Mediterranean Studies. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Brendan Burke, Professor of Greek and Roman Studies at the University of Victoria, and who is presently Andrew W. Mellon Professor at the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. He also served as the interim academic director of the Canadian Institute in Greece and still keeps close ties with this organization. He obtained his PhD from UCLA while in Greece and Turkey on various excavations. Since 2007, he has been co-directing the Eastern Boeotia archaeological project in central Greece. And the talk will present the results of the excavations and survey by the CIG, Canadian Institute in Greece, in collaboration with the Ephorate of Antiquities of Boeotia from 2012 to 2018. The site of Eleon had never been explored archaeologically before this work, and the team have discovered a cemetery of the early Mycenaean period, a late Helladic settlement, and evidence for an archaic classical period sanctuary. And so it is with pleasure that I give the floor to Professor Burke.
Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you, Bob Peck. It's very nice to see all of you here, and of course, many thanks to the ambassador too for welcoming us all here. I am speaking from Athens, so it's I have a little bit nicer weather, I guess, than you all do there. So let me share my screen. I'm also a bit, I have to confess, a little almost out of practice from the Zoom because I've been very fortunate to be teaching on site in Greece here at the American School. So let me see, do you see the screen now? Was that sorry, I don't see, I have lost you.
No, there's no screen.
Okay, just a second, sorry. Okay. As I said, I spoke too quickly there. Nope. Share now. It's share.
Yes.
Great. See, I do need practice, so I am very grateful to be here. And so what I thought I would do with today's talk is highlight several aspects of our research, and but I also wanted to give an idea of what it's been like to do our excavation, how we have gone through the stages of starting a new project like this. And as Louise mentioned, this site hadn't been studied before the Canadian Institute, and our team was allowed to start working there in 2007. So what I'd like to do today is, let's see, I'll talk first about the location, the sources, and the survey that we did. And then we'll work our way down chronologically as we do in our excavation. I'll look at the archaic and classical levels at Eleon from about 700 to 400 BC. And then we'll move into the Bronze Age. And there are many subphases to the Mycenaean period. And I give these terms just for fairly simple recollection. The post-palatial age, the age after the great destructions, age of the Trojan War, if we want to think about that. The palatial period from about 1400 to 1200 BC. And then I'm using this term here, even on the Mycenaean mainland, the pre-palatial period. This is the age of the great Mycenaean material that you may have seen at Mycenae from about 1700 to 1600. Sometimes it's called the shaft grave era. So post-palatial, pre-palatial, palatial, and pre-palatial. So to situate us, I will show you, here we are in Boeotia or Boeotia. We are in Eastern Boeotia. We are just about 17 kilometers east of the modern city of Thebes, about an hour plus drive from central Athens. Ancient Eleon is, of course, is an ancient name. The village we work in is modern Arma. There's an ancient town called Arma also that appears in the sources, but that is confusingly located in the town of modern Eleonas. So modern Eleonas, ancient Arma, modern Arma, ancient Eleon. And also I give you an idea where we are located within the territory of southern Greece, especially, and I highlight to you too the site of Mycenae, which I'll talk about just briefly in this lecture to kind of give us an overview of where we are. So in Eastern Boeotia, maybe some of you know of this area too because of the Tanagra Air Force Base, so a very important and historically significant site for the Greek military. We're also just to the west of the large island of Euboea and the important sites of Lefkandi and Chalkis over here. Thebes is the large urban center within our territory, and Eleon is just located about 14 kilometers east. It's located on a very elevated plateau and a very fertile plain, and I think that was key for its foundation there. The reason we started our project pretty much is because in the early 1990s in the city of Thebes, public works projects were going on. They were laying new water pipes and sewer systems. And within the modern city of Thebes, which sits atop the ancient Kadmos, the palace of Kadmos, more linear B tablets were found, a very significant number, into the hundreds. Linear B is the written language of the earliest Greeks. This is a syllabic script that records Mycenaean Greek. It is Greek, it's just not written alphabetically, it's written syllabically. This tablet, FT140, records different place names within the territory of Thebes, which starts the heading off first, Tekkaya, that is the place of Thebes. The second few other lines are a little bit harder to read, but on the fifth line, we do see reference to a place called Ereoni. These are the syllables that when you spell them out, Ereoni, it becomes Eleon. So we knew that there was a place or a city called Eleon within the orbit of the palace at Thebes, the Kadmos. This tablet also significantly records very large amounts of olive production and also seed grain. This gra is a word for grain and pe is a word for seed. It may be an actual account of amounts of grain and olive, or it may be recording the territories that are being cultivated on behalf of the palace at Thebes. In any case, it was a very significant discovery, and it gave attention to this idea of locating the site of Eleon. We also looked at our ancient sources, of course, and several of you probably teach ancient Greek and Latin. We used our Homer, Herodotus, Strabo. They all make reference to a place name called Eleon. Eleon appears in Homer's Iliad as the home of King Amentor. We hear a long story about a boar's tusk helmet, which you see here in the slide. Sometimes it's shown actually in ivory. This is a Mycenaean warrior wearing a boar's tusk helmet. We were very excited. The very first season of our excavation, we actually found a boar's tusk fragment with a drill hole here that would have shown that it was attached to a helmet. We also relied on the ancient source of the writer Plutarch, so very famous and connected to Boeotia. And in his work of the 1st century CE, he does make references to cult activity that may help us understand the cult at Eleon. And I'll get to that very shortly. So before we started our excavation, we wanted to get a feel for the territory and the material culture that we could be expected to find in any excavation. So this is the plain I was talking about that leads from Thebes on the left and the Euboean Gulf on the right. Boeotia sometimes gets a bad rap, I think. I actually think it's very beautiful there, and it's also very fertile. It's extremely valuable land for agriculture. So this is the view from our Acropolis at ancient Eleon, the Mount Sagmata in the distance. This was what we did over the course of 3 seasons with volunteers from all over Canada, from the US, England, Australia. We walked these different fields between 3 different villages. Tanagra here on the right, Eleon, or in the village of Arma, and Eleonas, the modern village here, ancient Arma. So the gray areas are all of these mostly olive groves and vineyards that we walked and collected sherds as we found them. These territories were somewhat known and explored by earlier archaeologists, especially Tanagra, which was home to, well, not home, but was the location of two major cemeteries. And these cemeteries yielded the Tanagra Larnaces. These are burial chests that are unique in Aegean art, Bronze Age art, because they are very clear descriptions and paintings of actual funerary scenes on funerary vessels. So as you can see on this sarcophagus, these are Mycenaean mourners attending to the burial of a young child within a chest that looks a lot like the chest on which the scene is painted. So these scenes, there's similar versions of it on Crete, but on the mainland of Greece, they are somewhat unique. And they were located in these chamber tombs here. We did not excavate these. Eleon, or in Arma village, was famous because of the polygonal wall, the large scale wall that I'll show you in just a second. But nearby, we had chamber tombs also. And you can see one of them here. So it was always our interest in the site of Eleon itself and this elevated Acropolis. I hope you can see the rotating image. We made a digital model of the site. Photogrammetry was helpful, other Google Earth and other sources. Our collaborator in the project when we started was Vasilis Aravantinos of the 9th Ephorate and the director of the Thebes Museum until 2011. And then for 10 years now, we have been working with Alexander Harami of the Ephorate of Antiquities of Boeotia. My collaborator is Brian Burns at Wellesley College. And so I really must acknowledge all of the help that we do with the archaeology is very much a team effort. And I would be remiss not to mention my colleagues. So that gives you an idea of the landscape itself. We mapped out the territory that we were exploring. And these are the trenches that we opened, especially along this side of the site. There is a medieval tower, and there is an entire research project that could happen that focuses on this medieval, probably Frankish to Byzantine and Ottoman period tower and the settlement around it. We only have so much time and energy to devote, but we hope to have collaborators that will be interested in this period. We also did geophysical survey, and this was very helpful both in 2010 for us to get the permission to do excavation. We paired the geophysical results with the collection survey that we did, and then we did our excavation. Last summer in 2021, we had a small team and we were fortunate that COVID regulations allowed it. We were able to do more geophysical work on the site. And that's what you see on the left, the territory of the Acropolis that we explored. And yes, there are a lot of anomalies. It's a little bit like reading an X-ray in your doctor's office. You think something's there and you're not sure what it is. It takes a lot of refining, and we're working through the data. Lots of points were collected and lots of different techniques were used. But basically, we are trying to get a reading of what is underneath the surface of the Acropolis itself. We're seeing the extent of the wall that encloses the Acropolis. We're seeing this anomaly down here. I hope you can see my pointer. It's very telling. You can see rectilinear features. So we do hope to start a new phase, a new campaign of excavation in 2023. This coming summer, we'll be doing more geophysical survey, both here on the Acropolis and down below within the landscape. So as I mentioned to you, this is the polygonal wall. This is the remains that have been standing at the site since antiquity, since it was built. Travelers came through, they noted it, but it had puzzled us too, because archaeologists didn't really give the site very much attention. In 2014, we dug a trial trench in front of it to try to get at the date of the wall. It always was puzzled people, when was this wall constructed? It is massive, it is polygonal. Sometimes it's called lesbian or polygonal masonry that's similar to the architecture on Mytilene. Every piece is custom made like a jigsaw puzzle. And the interesting thing about this wall also is that it has a curved plan to it. Here you can see my colleague Brian Burns, and it is very, very large. It comes along, there's a rough subsurface, there's a leveling course, and then the wall steps up and it continues along this path. So in the lower left, you can see the course of the polygonal wall. It comes along, it was eroded away there, but it continued on, and this was our trial trench there. The lowest levels in the foundation of the wall, we found very little material, but the material that we did find dated to the end of the 6th century BC. So in the Archaic period, about 510 BC is what we'd say. So a very significant project, and we're trying to figure out exactly for what purpose was this large wall built. We don't have a city or a settlement that goes with it necessarily. What we have of this period, of the Archaic period, is primarily religious. But we don't have temples, we have dedications and offerings. Here's a drone video that gives you a better idea perhaps of the southern tower of the wall, the polygonal nature of it. It juts out here. The blocks are very well made. We're working on the quarry source of it as well this summer, and it steps up. That's where that photo was taken before. Comes along, we did extensive cleaning. People in the nearby communities have, throughout the centuries, have come through and taken blocks away and used them in their fields. It's a very good source of well-cut masonry. Here's the part where we dug the exploratory trench. And then this wall seems to be part of an entrance system. So as you enter into the Acropolis at Eleon, you go up a ramped approach. And I will show you a drawing of it. You come up, here's that tower. You come up in the orange levels here, the ramp up. And this has multiple surfaces to it. Here it is in the aerial photograph, and we excavated these multiple surfaces. We found pits that were dug in them. But we also found a very large threshold block, an entranceway, with wheel wear marks on it and built elements to it. So it was a very impressive, fancy door. The puzzling thing is we don't know what it was leading to. We've explored it and we've tried to figure it out, and we're still working on that. But during our excavation of this area, we found some very impressive material, including this Archaic period black figure drinking cup, a kind of Kylix or FP class type A cup. And you can see the fragments of the figures. They're very well painted. Our ceramicist, one of them, Trevor Van Dam, he was on the island of Rhodes and found this vase on display. And it is almost certainly by the same artist. If you see the way the bearded man here and his headpiece and its cloak is shown, it's very similar. The same way that the young men are attending to him, holding spears, the way their hair is colored and painted in different colors. It's the same artist. There's elite material here at ancient Eleon. It's hard to say much more than that. In the excavations of the ramp levels, though, we found multiple examples of female figurines. Here you can see one of our students digging the figurines themselves using careful dental picks, and also with these miniature vessels. These are little kodaliskoi. We don't understand exactly how they worked. They're very hard to make because they're so small. You can't really throw them on a big wheel and spin them like you would a full pot. Maybe they held first fruits or grains. We're not sure. We have bronze fiale as well. These are sort of dish-shaped vessels made out of bronze in this case, probably used for pouring libations or sacrifices of some kind. And then we have distinctive Boeotian Kylix ware, as it's called, on the lower right. So this is the nature of the ceramics. Here are some of the figurines. We have multiple heads. Some of them are complete bodies. It was a very challenging project. One of our team members wrote a master's thesis at UBC on the figurines. They date from this Archaic period into the Classical period. We have 170 complete. Here's my favorite statistic. They weigh altogether, the fragments weigh about 56 kilograms. So 124 grams of just figurine fragments that we've been able to recover just from the ramp. So it's almost the weight of a young woman. a very, very large number, all female. Some of them are shown carrying water vessels like you see here, but some of them are seated. Some have painted remains also shown on it. So this seems like a cleanup operation from a sanctuary somewhere on the Acropolis. People took the material and placed it in these pits or deposits. So the question comes, who is this cult for? We go back to Plutarch. We don't have much material that is contemporary with Plutarch of the Roman, and even in the Hellenistic period, we don't have anything. But the site was known, travelers recorded it, and we do hear about a figure named Scamander, who becomes king. He named the Inachus River, turned it into called it the Scamander. There is a stream he called Glaucia from his mother, another spring he called Acadusa after his wife. And there he created a shrine to his three daughters, whom even in Plutarch's time, they honored with the name the Maidens. So we don't have much to go on, but for this, we may think that maybe there was a cult of young women at the site of Eleon. We have a small fragment that may actually be even to Athena, potentially. We have some wall hangings. You can see this had a hole in it. It was probably attached to with a nail, maybe on a built structure. But again, we need to do more work on this, on the Acropolis, to really get a better idea of the actual cult. So that was all I really wanted to talk about for the archaic and classical levels at ancient Eleon. I could do more, but I know we don't have all afternoon. So I wanted to travel back in time and talk a little bit about the Mycenaean age. This is the period of very large central structures, palaces, as they're often called, of the Mycenaeans, somewhat contemporary with the Minoans on Crete. The Mycenaean age, we can generously say from 1700 BC to 1050 BC, even in the post-palatial period. These are some of the finds, especially most of them associated with the site of Mycenae, which you have perhaps heard of here in the heartland of the Argolid, but other great palaces exist: the Palace of Nestor at Pylos, Tiryns, Athens, and then up in northern Greece as well, even in the area of Volos, Iolkos has a Mycenaean palace. Knossos on Crete has its own Mycenaean phase to it. So this is the period and the cultural realm that we're dealing with. So the site of Mycenae, here you can see a really nice image of the fortified walls, rich in gold as Homer described it. This site, of course, was first explored by Heinrich Schliemann, celebrating the 200th year of his birth, and his wife, Sophie Schliemann, here in the 1870s. They worked at Mycenae. They uncovered spectacular finds, of course, many of you have probably seen. The so-called Mask of Agamemnon is among them. And this comes from Grave Circle A, perhaps dating about 1600 BC. What is more likely what Schliemann first found is this mask, another death mask, perhaps not as regal looking as the Mask of Agamemnon, but this was another one. He found a huge amount of wealthy material concentrated in this grave circle. And what I'm getting at is the idea that what the Mycenaeans did is they had very large communal tombs. They had shafts, they had rock-cut chambers, and they delimited the space. Most often they kept it separate from the living areas, the settlements, but they were close by. Later Mycenaeans even incorporated this grave circle A within the walls of Mycenae. There were grave stelae that marked the burials here on the left. Here is a sketch of what some of these reused tombs were like, with the types of Mycenaean materials: swords, daggers, cups, other things found on the surface of the tomb. And as I said, they were reused. In the 1950s, the site of Mycenae was becoming more visited. The road was expanded, and the archaeologists, George Milanos especially, discovered a second grave circle outside the walls. Here you can see this model, grave circle B here, and then inside the wall, grave circle A. All of this dates to the early Mycenaean or shaft grave era. And here are some of the grave goods associated with it. So why am I talking about Mycenae? I hope there'll be a point toward the end of my discussion. Here is the excavations we've done to bring us back to Eleon. These are some of the household remains of the palatial period and post-palatial period here also. And this is our grave area that I'll concentrate on. And this is the polygonal wall. So I just wanted to at least, again, bring us back and get us thinking again about the chronological period of the Mycenaeans. Realize it's not just one period, it actually spans centuries, 5-6 centuries. So here are the houses and the structures that we've excavated so far. And when we started our project, we really thought this is what we were going to be looking at was a settlement. And I won't get into too much detail on this. You can see some of the architecture here and highlighted in green. These are the walls that are mapped out and traced. Some are on a different orientation than the ones to the north, and we're working on that as well. The significance of that, the planning of the community. But what we found is both post-palatial material in the upper levels. These are the material, this is material that dates after the destructions of the other Mycenaean palaces, like at Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, and the Kadmos at Thebes. Those great palaces were destroyed, but in some places, life continued on in the post-palatial LH3C era, the 12th century. So we had large craters like this. You see people, it's very fragmentary, obviously, but you can see this is the front of a horse and he's pulling a chariot. This is the top of a chariot wheel. Again, very sort of impressive. This is not just a simple farmstead. Also from this area, as we excavated lower down, we found palatial material as well. This is a bone head. You can see where it was found. Here I give in the lower part, this ivory head from Mycenae is just used for comparison. It is somewhat, it's very puzzling to us, this figure. It's very, very small. It's only about 2 centimeters. So basically about the size of your thumbnail. His inlaid eyes, perhaps with a kind of glass or gypsum. And he's not perfect. And he's not made out of ivory. He's made out of cattle bone. But he looks and kind of imitates the palatial style ivory that we get from Mycenae to some degree. It was probably inlaid maybe in furniture or some sort of other kind of regal construction, we don't know. To the north, we have drinking vessels, communal events, people were coming together. The shirred hearths are very distinctive of the post-glacial period. Here are some of the nice ceramics, and they're very well photographed, I think. So we thank our team. Just wanted to, we have specialists who focus on these exclusively. Drinking kylopes, as you can see there. But also, again, now from the palatial period, we have this, our most spectacular find in a way. This is in the Thebes Museum. This is a jewelry mold made out of a very nice kind of red steatite, a very fancy stone, has 7 different designs on it where gold was poured in to make a mold. From the Kadmos itself, we have these gold beads that were excavated by earlier people. And there is nearly a 1-to-1 correspondence between our jewelry mold and these gold beads. So it's hard not to make a suggestion that perhaps these beads came from ancient Eleon. So the reason what our work we hope contributes is to understand how these Mycenaean centers worked. They weren't just single centers. They operated and controlled a vast territory, a network, and much of that was recorded in their Linear B tablets as well. So we're getting an understanding of what was happening in Thebes by looking at ancient Eleon. So this was 2014-15. My colleague Brian and I, we thought, okay, this is where we'll be focusing our attention on the late Mycenaean period. When we started to move to the center of our grid, we slowly started to expose Mycenaean burials, and that came very much unexpectedly to us. We actually used this stone as our 0 point. We thought no one will never dig here, we'll never move here. What we didn't realize is that this was actually the top of a very low tumulus, a burial mound, that was enclosing a very significant cemetery complex, what we call the bluestone structure. So in 2014, we exposed just the southern and, well, a little bit of the eastern part of this complex. You can see these cobblestones here in the lower right. These are the cobblestones that were very nicely and intentionally laid over the outline of the bluestone structure that was roughly rectangular. With more exposure and excavation, we found that there were multiple levels, of course, to this building, very complicated. And you see our drawing by our architect. I realize it's all, a lot of detail there. But in the lower left, I think you can see the strata. And we think we're mapping out the phases of the building up of the tumulus itself. It doesn't stretch back very far in time. It's actually concentrated within a short period of time, maybe about 100 years, maybe from 1700 BC to 1550 BC, roughly around there, the time of the shaft graves at Mycenae. So in 2015, we exposed what we thought were 3 burials. This turned out not to be an actual burial, number 3. I'll show you in just a second. It turned out to be a dromos, an entryway. We had these walls that came down as support structures for the tumulus itself. With the permission of the Ephorate, we were able to remove the walls, the constructions, because they were very poorly made. And what we found in the center of one of them was that one of the blocks turned out to be a grave stele, a marker. It had no carving on it. It wasn't as nicely made as the ones at Mycenae, of course, but it was a standing grave stele, marking the burials around it. The ones at Mycenae were all found in the fill, displaced. We excavated a few more tombs, and a year or 2 later, and we discovered a second grave stele, marking this bluestone structure. The bluestone structure seems to be marked by these 2 stelae, upright stones. And the structure itself is roughly rectangular, if you can follow my arrow running along here. And we have burials inside and outside. This is one burial, tomb 11. I edited myself, don't worry, I should not talk about that one today. But the corners of the building are marked also by very large stele-like stones. This is about 6 feet tall, a person taller than most people on our excavation. There's another large stone at the far corner here, there and here. And this, again, was mounded over with that earthen fill. And then stone platforms were constructed, and those cobble layers were built over it as also. So this was a very special place. These tombs were constructed, individuals were placed inside, the cobbles were laid, the stones were made, and then the earthen fill was built over it. And it stood in the landscape, and no buildings were constructed on top of it of the later Mycenaean period. Pretty remarkable. Here are the stelae marked in gray for you. And so maybe you would think, okay, we try to avoid the word elite. They are separated people and they are special. But what we found is that the individuals, and I do stress that these are individuals, and I should caution you too, I will be showing human remains. So just to be aware, I'll be showing you some human remains from the excavations of this cemetery. What we found is that these people were not very large in stature. They certainly are not the truly elite people who were excavated in grave circles A and B at Mycenae. They were larger, healthier, and stronger. Mostly many male figures and skeletons as well. We have a mix, and we have a mix of ages. And strangely, we have a pretty strong concentration of young children. And not even infants, but actually children who are in the 7 to 12-year-old range. And that's somewhat unusual in a burial population, because usually the most difficult part of a person's existence is in their childhood. And if they live beyond the earliest ages of childhood, they usually live a fairly okay time. And it's in their 30s and 40s that death will usually come more often. So I'll show you some of our tombs. This is the large cover slab that shattered apart as it was being excavated. Our colleague from the Greek Ephoria was there to help us to do this very delicate work. When that cover slab was lifted, we found that stomion, the dromos of what we called tomb 3 is over here on the left, that entered into this rock cut built chamber tomb. There was a wall that separated it, or a door that could be moved and put back in place. And with this tomb was probably used multiple times. So one individual was placed inside, grave goods were put there. Their body decayed, someone else in the community died, and they opened the tomb up again. They pushed those remains to the side and put another individual in. And they did this about at least 10 times for 10 adults. And then we also have an adolescent and 2 additional adults that were the last individuals buried at the site. Here you can see Nick Herman from Texas State, who's been leading an excellent team to focused on these human remains. And it's very sensitive work. And we're very respectful as much as we can, because yes, these are people from well over 3,000 years ago, but they were individuals, they were people. The grave goods that were found, here you can see our PDF that'll give you from the photogrammetry to give you an idea of the construction of the tomb, the slabs, and the human remains themselves. It isn't, we recognize we're not Mycenae. I don't need to keep repeating that, but it's the reality is that the Mycenae is completely unique. But we do have the multiple used tombs and these very elaborately built constructions. The grave goods that help us date the tomb are ceramics like this. We have this polychrome ware, this beautiful jug. These are stylized dolphins that are painted on it. These minion vessels, matte painted ware as it's called, and then early Mycenaean. This is an ascos. It looks a little like a teapot. Our most impressive find from the tombs is probably this. This is the pommel made out of ivory. This is real ivory, not animal bone, for the hilt of a sword. We don't have the swords. I just show you these for comparison. And this one here is actually of stone. But those were from tomb 5, which is just nearby this grave stele here. I won't go through all of them. Don't worry, they give at least 15. But tomb 6 is the one that is in between the 2 grave stele. In some ways, it is the most prominent of all the tombs, and it is very modest. It's very small, and it contained the articulated remains of a single child who is estimated to be about 10 years old. But by the study of the teeth, Nick Herman, who has studied the development of humans, can date, especially these children, pretty accurately. However, you would look at the child and the remains, and they were very, very small, and perhaps even malnourished. Perhaps they suffered disease. We don't have those results yet. But it is strange that this is not a very fancy child within the village who had the greatest life throughout its first 10 years. So we don't know why a child would be buried in between these 2 grave stele. It sort of challenges our preconceived notions of burials of this period. There were small grave goods found with the child, these miniature vessels, and they're string holes, maybe they were suspended, and 3 copper alloy bronze hair coils. So nothing elaborate, nothing gold, certainly. Okay, let's look at tomb 10. This is what everyone is looking at as the workmen were all there. It was an exciting discovery back in 2018. Here's 2010. You can see the rest of the burials as they have been exposed. Tomb 5 is down here with the L shape. Tomb 6 with the child. Tomb 10 was over here. What we first found were cobble layers, and that was not surprising. We lifted the cobbles and we began excavations. Our team, we knew by this point with our 10th burial that this is the nature of it. Lift up these small fist-sized cobbles and we would likely find a cover slab. This was our team of Canadian and American students digging, and what we found was a very large cover slab, 2 meters in length, 18 centimeters thick, 90 meters wide. Here's our workman associated with the museum who came again to help us. It actually broke in half as it was being lifted, and intentionally so, the cover slab. And when we lifted it, I have other images of it again coming, but just to give you an idea, we found 3 individuals inside, and we've been able to phase the use of this tomb to 2 primary phases. First, 2 adults were placed inside, and then their remains were pushed to the west of the tomb, and a child was placed inside. And other grave goods were placed with this child burial. And I'll go through that with you in just a second. So this is what it looked like when we lifted the cover slab. Again, it's very emotional. It's it's impactful work. And again, as I said, we're very sensitive to it. We think these were 2 young men, maybe about 20 to 25 years old, who died here. The remains of their heads are over here. They were probably more in the tomb when they were initially deposited. But the tomb needed to have a second use. So the cover slab was lifted, the 2 men were pushed to the side, and then we think a textile was placed over them. And then this young child was placed inside, and you can see the ankle and the knee and the hips and the backbone, and this is the child. Grave goods were put in with the child, and they wore a bracelet of bronze, which you see in green here. And in the tomb were placed these unfired clay vessels that are also unique. They're not beautiful, but they're important because they're unfired. And still preserved to us. So our conservators, Vicky Karas and Nefeli Theokaros, need to be thanked for this. I've asked ceramic people about it, and they're like, it's not decorated, it's not fired, it's not beautiful. We don't know, we don't have any comparison for it. And then the bracelet is here. It was attached to the radius and the ulna around it, the arm bones of the child. Okay, I mentioned the other grave goods. This was peculiar to us. This is not a textile. If we were in a live audience, I'd have you guess. This is actually the remains of a sea sponge. Very remarkable. We're far from the sea, but someone took a sea sponge and placed it in this burial as a kind of offering. In other tombs, we get murex shells, which have been something I've been always interested in for making purple dye. Okay, but most significantly, when you look at when the bones were being excavated and recorded individually very, very carefully, it was very clear we found these fragments. Again, I think you can make out what these are. These are textile remains. This is woven, the images of woven textile. And there's a lot of it. We had at least 40 fragments found. Weft-faced tabby, as it's called. My colleague, Bella Dimova from the British School, is a textile analyst. I studied cloth production of the Bronze Age conveniently. So it was it was an amazing find. It seems to be under the child and over the adults. So just with this rough reconstruction, it might've been about 75 meters in length, separating the group. Here are the more details of the fragments. You can see the woven nature, the warp and the weft. And here are some of the photographs of the fragments itself. So we used an scanning electron microscope to look to see if we could see, was this linen or was this wool? Unfortunately, nothing really remains. These are pseudomorphs, generally speaking. What we're seeing here is actually the remains of the fiber that was there. But for various reasons, Bella and I both suggest that this was wool. Comparisons, and it may be the earliest wool in the Aegean. from the volcanic eruption of Akrotiri, we have some wool fragments from Hanya on Crete. There's some wool that's a little bit later. But for other reasons too, we think this was wool. The fibers themselves, the twist and dimensions of them doesn't go well with linen. And we also can see in some areas that we think there were buttons attached or buttonholes, because some of the spaces are greater than others for this textile from Tomb 10. Okay, I will bring things to a close now. I know we've seen a lot of burial remains, and I won't talk too much about them. Tomb 7 is very interesting because it's unusually made. There was a main chamber and then a sort of extension. And in the extension, it was what we have what are called commingled remains, curated remains taken from somewhere else and placed in this burial pit. So this is the top of a skull, and we don't have the rest of the body. It was somewhere else. Or parts of a long bones from a leg, and then we don't have the rest of that individual. So for some reason, this pit was significant, and the remains were taken from different parts, maybe in the landscape, and brought here into the bluestone structure. Grave goods were fairly nice. This beautiful bichrome jug with a pointed base. It doesn't stand up on its own. We actually have the stand in which it's sat. Again, somewhat unique within Mycenaean ceramics. All of this material dates to about 1700 BC, as I should say. So this is the bluestone structure from above. We call it the bluestone structure because of these shiny, polished, flat stones that create the outline. It's not exactly a building. We don't have a roof and a floor. We think of it more as a delimited space in which these burials were located. So Tomb 5 is here, 6 is here. Tomb 10 hadn't been excavated, it's under these cobbles here. And then this was Tomb 7 that I was just showing you. I won't go into it at all, but again, and there's Tomb 11, that's very interesting. Yeah, we're excited to come back this summer because we will be lifting our tarps and we'll be exposing this again. And so anyone here listening can, certainly visit us in the excavations as we're working in late May through early July. So again, I just bring in Mycenae as a rough comparison. The remains from Grave Circle B and A are spectacular, but it doesn't matter how spectacular the finds are. What they show us is that communities were separating themselves and they were reusing these burial spaces. At other sites near Sparta, Ios Vasilios, for example, or even at Eleusis, we see in the same period that the early Mycenaeans were mixing things up. They were experimenting. They were doing things regionally, and they were very much interested in secondary treatments of individual bones. So it seems that people were marking a claim to territories with burial remains, literally with human remains in cemeteries, but in a unsystematic or dissimilar way in the early phase. By the later phase, by the Palatial period, it became more standardized and the Mycenaean culture sort of formed itself. So this is what we're getting at with the results of our work anyway. So in 2022, as I said, we will be lifting our huge tarps. These are lake liner nylon that we get from Crete. It serves us very well for preserving the architecture. We do some virtual reality work. And here you can see our multiple teams over the years. We are extremely grateful to our Greek colleagues and hosts, Vasilis Aravantinos, who started us off, and Alexander Harami at the Thebes Museum, and the Ephorate of Antiquities of Boeotia. Without them, we could not do our work at all. They are extremely valuable partners to us. So our project takes Canadian students. We run it as a field school through the University of Victoria. Brian brings students from Wellesley College also. So if you're interested, please get in touch. You have to like dogs and cats. You can see this is where we have our dinner just off the coast of Boeotia and Euboea in the distance. So these are our partners, and I thank you all very much for your attention. So thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. That was amazing. What a tour to take us far away from snowy Ottawa. I'm sure that people will have lots of questions. Maybe I could start off with one. I'll just let people know that if you want to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand icon. You can put on your camera and raise your hand, wave until I see it. You can put your question in the chat, or you can put the word question in the chat and I'll call on you, just so that we're not all going at once with Zoom. So my question was about the human remains. Have you done any DNA testing? Is there enough of a sample?
Well, yes, thanks for that question. That is the big issue always. And yes, we have done DNA. We've done DNA sampling, and we've sent material off to Copenhagen, and we're part of bigger projects that are sort of trying to get a picture of human connections throughout the Bronze Age. But the preservation isn't great. And that's been a little bit disappointing for us. We have some information, and it seems, it's not what I do, but there's material that can be studied further, sort of more refinements, more filters placed on it. But it was the teeth that have been sampled from us, and then also the petrous bone, which is in your skull. There's only been a few of them that are preserved. So we are working on it, and we do want to know that very much. What are the family connections between the individuals in the bluestone structure? So yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I'll ask for my students if you said to get in touch with you for going on the dig. Are you also on the Archaeological Institute of America Fieldwork Opportunities page?
We have been other years. I've been away out of Canada for a bit, so my colleague who replaced me at UVic is running it, Trevor Van Dam, and I'm not sure if he ran it through the AIA. We do have a lot of interest, so I mean, we actually have a pretty good contingent lined up, but we're certainly interested in sort of giving people opportunities to come to Greece and get experience with excavating, for sure.
John?
Sorry.
John, you'll need to unmute if you have a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for a very interesting talk and what fine slides. You caught our attention many times to Mycenae. I was just wondering about the interaction between the Eleon and other palaces in the vicinity. Or Kadmos, for instance, I've noticed on one of your maps, one of your slides.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I know this is the area I'm especially interested in. We work primarily within the orbit of Thebes, modern Thebes and ancient Thebes, we believe. Our ceramics experts are looking at the fabrics, for example. We think we have some connections with the Corinthia, which isn't too far away from the coast to coast. So you could get to Corinthia, it's not too far to Mycenae as well. And then Kadmos and Thebes, certainly, yes, we're rivals with each other. But getting at a refined picture of interconnectivity, we don't have the amount of material yet to be able to do that, for say. Our ceramics are fairly standard for the late Mycenaean period, sort of we work, regional studies in Mycenaean ceramics. We fit well within central Greece. So it would be great to be able to talk about contacts and further afield, but we don't have that much. We have some imports from Crete. We have a seal stone, for example. We may even have some marble that could come from the Cyclades, but it's nothing completely unusual to have these small items that come from further afield.
what are we talking about distance-wise between, say, Thebes and Eleon or Kadmos and Eleon?
Well, Thebes would be about 15 kilometers away, so an easy walk within a morning. But or Kadmos from Thebes would, yeah, that would probably be a solid day. So and it's manageable, and it's definitely a territory. And also the landscape between those three is very manageable. Mostly level plains, some rivers, but certainly traversable.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Louise.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, not about the digs, but how close is it to Euboea? Because of course, last summer, there were some terrible fires and forest fires and so on in Euboea. And I hope actually the area that you're working in was not touched by those, but how far is Euboea from?
Yeah, no, thank you. Again, that's a very significant point to bring up. We can see Chalkis very just in the distance, and we think Lefkandi, so those would be in the central western part of Euboea. Northern Euboea, where they had the very bad fires, those would be over a mountain range and a bit in the distance. Our project had stopped by the time the fire started. I think it was more in August. But I was preparing to leave. I'm going to Evia in 2 weeks with the American school here. And so I went there in the summer to scout things out. And then I stopped by Eleon just during the fires, actually, when the roads finally opened. And it was a very dangerous, it felt like a tinderbox. You know, we sort of seen landscapes like that before where fire could have come. And thankfully, yes, our site was okay for the fires, and the village itself, more significantly, was okay also.
Good.
Yeah.
I think, well, another subject that I wanted to raise, because you were sort of saying that you would be working again in April, May, and June, and so on, and is to come back actually to what Bob Peck was saying, since this student grant that he was talking about is, in fact, a CIG SIMS student grant. And so certainly we would really like to know if some of the students are interested to go and work in your excavations. It would be interesting if our grant actually were used for that specific purpose. So I want to again insist that the committee will start looking at the applications as of the 1st of March. So if you know of anyone who wants a little bit of money to be able to come and work with you, then I think anyone who does, please insist that the applications go in as soon as possible.
I will. I certainly will. And you know, we are extremely grateful for the support students get to come work with us. We have some local support at UVic and throughout Canada as well. But you know, we also, the Canadian Institute in Greece, with our great colleagues here in the Ministry of Culture, we have other projects as well. And you know, in no way am I competitive with them. There are other projects students can go on. Northern Greece with Argylos, Marguerite Hogsma in Thessaly, Tristan Carter in Naxos, and work on Crete as well. So I hope I'm not missing anybody, but there are other Canadian projects. But truly and sincerely, we value and we want to have Canadian participation. And it is a priority of our project. And so, yes, we would be very happy to have funded students come.
Are there more questions? Maybe I'll take this opportunity then to thank our speaker for a wonderful lecture. And I hope that we will be able to visit your site. I hope that we'll be able to come over to Greece and travel more easily again. So thank you very much, and thank everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great.
Thank you.